Please be warned. Inspired by a True Story deals with crimes that may contain adult themes and violence, and is intended for a mature audience.
It's 1971. And the Perron family have moved into a beautiful dream of a home. Unfortunately, it harbored a dark, evil secret, and for much of the next decade, this family would claim to be tortured by a malevolent spirit, and they were begging for help. In 2013, renowned horror director James Wan reinvents history as Ed and Lorraine Warren are reimagined as the only ones who can stop the horror. Grab your crucifixes, it's time for an exorcism of facts, because The Conjuring was indeed inspired by a true story. Welcome to True Crime for Cinephiles. This is inspired by a true story, a podcast devoted to keeping artists honest. This is Season 2, the first episode of Season 2 of Inspired by a True Story. We're going to discuss the overall details of the actual crimes or story, as it were, then review the film on its own, how much of that is true, and how much was Hollywood magic. You can find other episodes at thehollywoodoutsiders.com, and you can share your thoughts on this episode or suggest a film by emailing us inspired@thehollywoodoutsiders.com. It's good to be back. I'm Aaron Peterson, an accredited film critic for the Hollywood Outsider podcast and website. And joining me today are my fellow film critics and true crime devotees, John Davenport.
Hey, buddy.
And Amanda Sink.
Hello, hello.
And boy, does John have feelings on this whole scenario.
Oh, yeah. The reason why I was so excited for this episode was that at one point in my life, I believed everything the Warrens said. I thought ghosts are real, demons are real, all that other stuff. And then somewhere along the line, I disconnected from all those beliefs and then started seeing what the Warrens were, maybe a little too angrily because of maybe being, lied to all these years. But yeah, this is why I'm excited.
Possibly.
Potentially.
That's your opinion. We have different opinions here. That's what a podcast is about, right? We are going to talk about the facts, what we've been able to prove are facts. But this one has a lot of hyperbole involved.
We all know that I have a weird reaction to hyperbole.
Nobody knows that.
Not a single person.
Not a single person
outside
knows
of
that.
You, maybe your therapist.
Well, Aaron's the one who points it out.
No, I pointed out the Warren specifically. I didn't have anything to do with hyperbole. I wasn't in part of my deal. I had nothing to do with that. That's all you. But now we know, and we can move forward with that. Amanda, what did you think about this whole scenario walking in? Did you believe a lot of it?
I did some years ago for quite a bit, and then kind of similar to John, I wouldn't say necessarily in regards to my beliefs on angels and demons and ghosts and all of that stuff, or possessions. I can't say that necessarily changed, but my belief in the Warrens in this situation has definitely been altered through information that's come about.
And we have already talked about them a little bit in the Amityville horror episode. If you want to go back to season 1, we covered that one. Very popular episode that people liked. I walked into this one pretty much feeling like I do every time I watch anything that's got anything haunted involved. Don't believe any of it. So it's like, this is great fiction. It's inspired by a true story that happens to be great fiction. So that's, unfortunately, I am the most skeptical, I think, of the trio here in regards to specifically this supernatural element. You probably got a better chance of convincing me Salem's Lot is based on a true story than you do The Conjuring, is what I'm saying.
I mean, to be fair, it is still based on a true story. The Warrens did truly exist.
Truly is.
The parents did truly exist. They all did have this belief that there was, an exorcism needed. And so there is still truth in it. It's just a matter of, I guess, more so, were the Warrens legitimate in their efforts? Because the parents, I would argue, the family, I would argue, were just open to figuring out what the heck was going on. And they did believe in supernatural. And so maybe that's the part that you can say whether or not from your perspective is true or not. But they really did lean on the Warrens, and so it ultimately comes from the Warrens.
That's true.
But the actual exorcism and collecting of all of those items and some of those things, those were all very real. Those things did happen. There's photos of them.
Some of those things happened. Some of those things. There was no
not everything.
Well, I'll tell. Well, I gotta hold it. Oh, it's right on the tip of my tongue.
I know.
We gotta go through the whole story.
What's
first.
real, what's not real, Aaron. We're teasing them.
We've got a whole story to tell you before we get to the real conversation. So let's move into it. We are doing 2 scary films to kick off season 2 as we start with The Conjuring 1, just the first movie. We're not talking about the other ones because we might come back to them in future episodes. And the next one is The Exorcism of Emily Rose, which is a tragic, horrible story. You might think it's another exorcism tale. It is a lot more horrible than that. Honestly, there's a lot more to that one. It's very tragic. But those are the 2 that we're going to do for Halloween month as we kick off season 2. And before we move on, I do want to say thank you to everybody that voted for us for the podcast awards. We did make the finalist list. We are in the top 10 of finalists for true crime, which is amazing. So thank you to everybody that listened. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. That's awesome.
Very exciting. Now let's get into it. As of this recording, The Conjuring is streaming on Max, but it's always subject to change. It was just on Netflix and it left. The Conjuring follows Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga as Ed and Lorraine Warren as they battle a demonic force haunting the family and house of Carolyn and Roger Perron. Can the Warrens stop this horrific force before it's too late? Of course they will. There are several sequels and spin-offs, but that doesn't make this film any less terrifying. New episodes are released of our podcast every 2 weeks and can be found wherever you listen to podcasts or at thehollywoodoutsiders.com. You can also hear episodes early by supporting the show at patreon.com/thehollywoodoutsiders. Film and true crime fans alike are always debating how true their true crime is, so break out that holy water, because the power of the Lord compels us to learn the truth behind Ed and Lorraine Warren in The Conjuring. Ed Warren Miney was born on September 7th, 1926. At 5 years old, Ed claimed to have seen an apparition, a light that grew into the shape of his family's landlady who had passed away the previous year. In the book, The Demonologist, The Extraordinary Career of Ed and Lorraine Warren, Ed recalled that she was semi-transparent, wearing what looked like some sort of shroud. Then, she vanished. He claimed to later have dreams of deceased relatives, and he eventually helped priests throughout his career, though he never officially became one. Lorraine Rita Moran was born on January 31st, 1927. She claimed to have similar abilities at a very young age, but it took a severe turn when she was 12. As she recounted in that same book I mentioned before, The Demonologist, she said, quote, "It was Arbor Day at her all-girls private school, and her classmates had just planted a sapling. Just as soon as they put the sapling in the ground, I saw it as a fully grown tree, filled with leaves blowing in the wind. When a nun asked her why she was staring at the sky, Lorraine responded, I was just looking up into the tree. She asked, are you seeing the future? Yes, Lorraine admitted, I guess I am. Both Ed and Lorraine lived in Connecticut, and they met in 1944 when they were both 16 years old at a local movie theater where Ed was an usher. This is my kind of story so far. They began dating, and Ed signed up for the Navy at 17, deployed, and when he came back for a 30-day leave after his ship went down, he and Lorraine married. And then Ed went back to war. They later had a daughter they named Judy. Guess nobody saw the ship sinking. They had thought after the war that they would make their living as artists. First landscapes, paintings and whatnot, and they gravitated eventually towards haunted houses, sketching them, gathering information about haunted houses, painting them, and then selling them around the country. It was an odd vacation, but one they clearly enjoyed. According to Lorraine, who did claim to be clairvoyant, she was initially the Scully in their relationship, a skeptic to the supernatural. In the beginning, she said, I was more than a bit wary of people with whom we spoke. I thought they were kind of suffering from overactive imaginations, or were just making things up to get attention. Irony? You decide. In 1952, the Warrens took a step forward in their business endeavors. They founded the New England Society for Psychic Research, even creating the Occult Museum, housing mysterious artifacts and tainted objects that they had collected over the years that was located adjacent to the Warren home. The Warrens began building a business of sorts, as ghost hunters or paranormal investigators, people that would investigate hauntings and help identify and rid evil spirits as possible. Notable cases include the Annabelle doll, which we may dive into deeper at a later date, the Amityville house, which we have already covered, the Perron family haunting, and many others. They notably did not charge money for their services. Rather, they made money by giving lectures at colleges or licensing the rights to their stories for entertainment projects like this one. This one being the film, not actually our podcast, though we will happily accept funds. But the Conjuring film itself is based on one haunting in particular, that of the Perron family. It was January of 1971 when Roger and Carolyn Perron moved their family into a 14-room farmhouse in Harrisville, Rhode Island. It was a beautiful home, 200 acres of land, and one many could only dream of, especially in today's market. Their daughters were Andrea Perron, Nancy, Christine, Cindy, and April. Andrea has documented these ordeals quite wonderfully in her book, House of Darkness, House of Light. Almost immediately after moving in, they began experiencing strange occurrences, including objects moving, hearing disembodied voices. Carolyn noticed small, strange things at first, like a broom moving or finding piles of dirt on a freshly cleaned floor. It was odd. It was unexplainable. The children also reported seeing spirits around the house, some friendly, and others much more aggressive. Occurrences began minorly, and then increased greatly over time. The Perron family had sunken everything into this home, therefore their finances kept them from simply selling and vacating the home. They had to stick this out. They had to find a way to live and coexist with these forces. And this is when Carolyn began doing research on the property. Carolyn learned that this house had been in the same family for 8 generations, and that many of those in that family had died under mysterious or horrible circumstances. Several of the children had drowned in a nearby creek. One was murdered, and a few of them even hung themselves in the attic. The Black Book of Burrillville, the town's former public records book, reveals that over the course of its existence, the property had been host to 2 suicides by hanging, 1 suicide by poison, the rape and murder of 11-year-old Prudence Arnold by a farmhand, 2 drownings, and the passing of 4 men who froze to death, in addition to other tragic losses of life. The worst spirit they encountered appeared to be the one known as Bathsheba, and it was believed that Carolyn was who Bathsheba wanted out of her home. Andrea Perron stated whoever the spirit was, she perceived herself to be mistress of the house, and she resented the competition my mother posed for that position. Bathsheba Thayer was a real person and born in Rhode Island in 1812. She married fellow Rhode Islander Judson Sherman, 1 year her senior, in Thompson, Connecticut on March 10, 1844. Bathsheba filled the role of housewife, while her husband, Judson, worked as a farmer on the land. Bathsheba and Judson had a son, Herbert. He was born when Bathsheba was 37 years old. Some claim she had 3 other children, who all died before they were 4. It's a sad story. Many proclaim that Bathsheba was a witch. According to History vs. Hollywood, suspicion grew when an infant mysteriously died in her care. When the baby was examined, it was determined that the mortal wound was caused by a large sewing needle that had been impaled at the base of the child's skull. Though the townspeople believed that Bathsheba sacrificed the infant as an offering to the devil, due to insufficient evidence, the court found that she was innocent of any wrongdoing. And despite her name being legally cleared, the public was not convinced, though no true proof exists to prove this theory. Mostly because she lived in a time when every woman who stood up for herself was branded a witch. In her book, House of Darkness, House of Light, Andrea Perron claimed that her mother, Carolyn, talked to a man who she refers to as Mr. McEachern. Supposedly, a bit of a local historian, Mr. McEachern told Carolyn that Bathsheba treated the help badly and that she starved and beat her Sherman farm staff. Bathsheba died on May 25, 1885. Now, back to the Perron family haunting. These occurrences continued for years. That's right, years. Andrea Perron stated in an interview with Freestat that the haunting was actually far more terrifying in reality than even what was shown in the film. But she feels differently about the spirits in the house than her mother did. She described the house as, quote, the most amazing place I've ever been in my life, and referred to it as a portal cleverly disguised as a farmhouse. Everybody's into different things, right? In October 1973, the Perron family reached out to renowned paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren, who we mentioned before. Despite the events of the film, the Warrens never exorcised the house, nor Carolyn. What they did was investigate the farmhouse through various methods, which, afterward, they did claim to witness assorted phenomena within the Perrons' farmhouse. They also deemed the house was haunted by multiple spirits, but most notably, Bathsheba was an overarching spirit. Things came to a head when Lorraine conducted a seance with Carolyn and the family. It was believed that during this seance, Carolyn became possessed by something. Lorraine was attempting to contact the spirits, and they had a message for all of them as Carolyn began acting erratic. Her chair rose from the ground, and she began speaking in tongues. Andrea Perron witnessed the event and stated, I thought I was going to pass out. My mother began to speak a language not of this world and a voice that was not her own. Her chair levitated, and she was thrown across the room. After the seance, there was no exorcism, and Roger demanded the Warrens leave and never return. He was worried about his wife's mental health after this event and refused any more of their services. In fact, Roger and Carolyn Perron and their family remained in that house, experiencing these same malevolent forces for several more years, until they were finally able to move in 1980. And once they left the house, the hauntings immediately stopped. Contrary to many opinions, Andrea Perron believed the Warrens did everything they could to help. And they stated, quote, Ed and Lorraine Warren walked into our house the night before Halloween in 1973. But I will go to my grave believing they did everything they could to help us. They just didn't know how. Andrea also, curiously, defended Bathsheba and Lorraine's claims that she was the force driving the chaos. Andrea said, quote, I think that's very unfair on Bathsheba. I just don't believe that. And I've had a spiritual connection with Bathsheba, even at her own gravestone. I've heard disembodied voices. She's come through Spirit Box to talk to me. She's a part of my consciousness and a part of my life. And I defend her at every turn. Ironically, that's more than Bathsheba ever had in her real life. New England Society for Psychic Research is still active to this day and is run by Judy and her husband, Tony Spiro. Their website houses much additional information on the Warrens at tonyspiro.com, should you be curious to look. When all is said and done, Ed and Lorraine Warren have an intriguing history. Some claim they are the greatest paranormal investigators in history. A true-to-life Mulder and Scully. While others proclaim they are nothing more than tricksters, and still others feel Ed was taking advantage of his wife's gifts or mental health issues. The theories are all over the place. What we do know is that when all was said and done, no one truly helped the Perron family. No one solved this problem. And no one gave them peace. Not even the Warrens. The Perrons dealt with these apparitions, spirits, demons, ghosts, psychosis, whatever you want to call it, however you want to label it. They dealt with it for years. Though film might portray this family as saved and grateful, reality sees it a different way. Ed Warren once famously said, quote, "Diabolical forces are formidable. These forces are eternal, and they exist today. The fairy tale is true. The devil exists. God exists. And for us, as people, our very destiny hinges upon which one we elect to follow." It's very true, Ed. The question truly is, should the Perrons have ever followed you? So that's it. That's The Conjuring. That's the story behind that haunting of the Perron family and that crazy 14-room farmhouse. Really, 14 rooms? I feel like it's a bit excessive, but when you got 5 kids, you need all the space you can get, right?
Yeah, you got to get away from them somehow.
You need a timeout, conference room. You need whatever you can do. A basement, I think I would use as basically a daycare center. Keep those kids straight.
That's one way to do it.
So now we get through it. That's a true story. What do you think? Because there are hugely stark differences. And how do you feel about the fact that they've made a film basically creating this married Mulder and Scully, if you will, who are out there fighting the demons and saving the innocents. And it wasn't quite to that level. Like, that didn't even happen in this particular story, which is the first film in this franchise that has become a universe, if you will.
I feel like this is one of those instances where Hollywood just took over something and made it so that it had a beginning, middle, and end, right? Or end, not Ed. It had an Ed already. You have these figures who have made their stamp on history in one way or shape or another. You have to give the story an ending. You know, you can't just let it be something where they showed up and then they got kicked out without making it interesting, you know?
Yeah, I think for the story, for the movie's sake, they had to come up with something. There's too much vagueness and there's too much ambiguity as to the truth. So it's innate that for them to make this story kind of, I think, to maybe what John's saying too, you have to build and fill in all the holes and make the story what you will. And that was up to them. They got to make that choice and create the persona that the rest of the world was going to believe or buy into. Now, is it an accurate one? That's probably a very different question that I don't know that any of us truly have an answer to, but I would say that it begins to feel like more and more there's less truth and less about what we really know about the Warrens, I guess. You know, as we learn about potential teenage pedophilia things happening.
We'll come back to that. That's a whole different story separate from this.
Well, yeah, but I mean, to me, it lends to the dishonesty or the lack of our true knowledge as to what has actually been going on. Because in my perspective, right, like, okay, take the pedophilia stuff aside and just stick with an affair.
Because we haven't even talked about that yet. We haven't even talked about it because it wasn't pertaining to Conjuring, but we will be coming to that. Don't worry. If your juices are flowing, it's coming.
Ew.
Poor choice of words. Poor choice of words.
Yeah, no crap. But to me, it does feel like there's some sort of, I don't know, like more and more we learn okay, we thought that this was a very happy married couple that were out there, like you said, fighting crime and trying to save the world, per se. But it gets grosser and grosser the more I learn, where I'm like, I don't feel like I really know who you are as a person to be able to say, I'm going to defend you. And what you say is the truth against what naysayers say isn't the truth, if that makes sense. So it's not necessarily about the context of what has or hasn't occurred outside of the film. It's the context of it seems like we're missing a lot of information. And the more I get information, the more I say it's skewing my belief in you as an individual, Ed and Lorraine Warren.
And speaking of that, just so everyone has full information as we discuss, I will go ahead and jump to that. So according to the Hollywood Reporter, okay, so this is taken directly from the Hollywood Reporter who has done research on this. Ed Warren was in his mid-30s when he allegedly met 15-year-old Penny. Having not gained enough fame as a self-trained demonologist to pay the bills in the early 1960s, Ed was working as a city bus driver in Monroe, Connecticut. Penny was a student at Central High School in the nearby town of Bridgeport who rode his bus. The two began an amorous relationship. Penny said in a legal declaration that she gave in November of 2014, according to that document, as well as recordings of Penny's recollection of events, by 1963, she had moved into the Warrens' home. For the next 40 years, she said, she had a sexual relationship with Ed with Lorraine's knowledge. At first, Penny stayed in a bedroom directly opposite the one occupied by the married couple, but eventually she moved into an apartment built for her above the home. One night he'd sleep downstairs, one night he'd sleep upstairs, according to her. In May of 1978, in her 30s, Penny became pregnant with Ed's child. She said in that declaration that Lorraine persuaded her to have an abortion because the birth of a child could become public and any scandal could ruin the Warrens' business. Though Lorraine has claimed to be a devout Catholic, Penny said, quote, her real God is money. And in one of the recordings that was obtained by the Hollywood Reporter, Penny said, they wanted me to tell everyone that someone had come into my apartment and raped me, and I wouldn't do that. I was so scared. I didn't know what to do, but I had an abortion. The night they picked me up from the hospital after having it, they went out and lectured and left me alone. And then Lorraine's attorney told the Hollywood Reporter that Judy and Tony Spira, the Warrens' daughter and son-in-law, never saw any of the alleged contact or conduct during the decades that they spent with Ed, Lorraine, and Penny. The Warrens opened their home to Miss Penny when she was 18 and had nowhere else to live following a childhood of neglect. This is what the lawyer wrote in an email. During much of their career, Ed and Lorraine were on the road working on cases and giving lectures, and Miss Penny lived at and watched the house. They also say Penny had a long-term boyfriend for much of that time, whom she eventually married, and the couple spent holidays with their family. The Spiras believe Penny is now being manipulated in 2014. Lorraine seems to have been intent on preventing any sordid aspects of her story from being portrayed on screen. Her deal with New Line to serve as a consultant on or model for The Conjuring includes unusual restrictions. The films couldn't show her or her husband engaging in crimes, including sex with minors, child pornography, prostitution, or sexual assault. Neither the husband nor wife could be depicted as participating in an extramarital sexual relationship. Talent attorney Jill Smith, for this article for the Hollywood Reporter, says she has never seen specific language barring such depictions, though individuals selling rights to their stories sometimes restrict portrayals, especially if you're a devout Catholic. I have done deals which prevented depictions of certain specific types of odious behavior, which are not relevant to the underlying story and in which, typically, the person is not known to have participated, Jill Smith said. That's the full information in regards to that.
Yeah, so you can see why maybe I'd feel a little less likely and inclined to jump on their defense, I guess is the way I see it. Because prior, and it's not even just that, it's everything too around like, okay, this isn't exactly what we thought was what happened or what occurred. And so for me, it's just another layer for that, where I'm like, it puts me more neutral into, maybe these things have occurred. I do like the fact that there were, instances documented where the Warrens would tell people, hey, this is actually just due to like a water leak. So they did have some level of honesty to people when, they didn't abuse or misuse that. And they didn't take money, though they got money through other means of their efforts, but they didn't actually accept money for people to pay them for this stuff. So there's like, I don't know, there's these two sides of the Warrens and the Conjuring, right? Where it's like, oh man, it seems like you guys could be good people, but it also seems like you guys could be dishonest when it benefits you. So it makes it tough.
And the Judith Penny allegation, her name is Judith Penny, those allegations have never been 100% proven in a court of law to my findings. So you can't say that they are accurate. You can't call them true. They're an accusation. So it's up to you. You take it how you will. I understand the accusation of her being 15 and whatnot, but it is a 40-year relationship. So that's, to me, a little different. It depends on when if it were true, when physical contact began. Was she legal? And also, that was during the era of Elvis Presley and Jerry Lee Lewis, where people were marrying 14-year-olds. I can't speak to that time and space. I think it's gross. And I think if we all agree, it's pretty gross. But I also know that during that time, people felt somehow differently.
I know we started this recording with me talking about how I got to this point.
Yeah, let's get back to it. Let's roll with this. Go ahead. Why do you have such a problem?
Yeah. Well, I know we talked about how I had an issue with them when it came to what kind of reality that they might have been living in. Was he a con man just carting his mentally ill wife from spot to spot? But as I started doing the research for this episode, it walks such a thin line from whether it's real or not real, or is it really real to them? And just because it's really real to them, is it hard for us to believe that they have the best of intentions? But when you look at the fact that they didn't take money and they did the best they could for everybody, it seems like they were doing the work they wanted to be doing. It's either that, or they were just so smart about how they marketed themselves once they started proving that these things happen, that they knew they can get more money off of the lecture circuit and off of the book rights and everything else, that, it's just a brilliant building of a mythos,
There are some paranormal investigators that have allegedly debunked Ed and Lorraine Warren.
Aaron, all I got to say is before you get into that, everyone else should be very aware. If you start to agree that these people have debunked, then you're giving validity to that field as a whole.
Look, I'm not going to give credence to the people that say that they are the ones that are legit and these people are wrong, just because I feel like now you're just building other people's mythos, right? I don't want to get into that. There are people that claim to have debunked the Warrens. Though I will be honest, I am not of the mindset that this is a legitimate phenomenon. I do believe there are many people who do believe that. And I do believe that there are people who want to help other people deal with those problems. I have seen enough to form an opinion that I believe the Warrens were trying to help, right? The family, the person that knows the most is Andrea Perron. She was there. It's really hard to argue with the person that was there. Right. She witnessed it. She firsthand, she saw what her mother went through. She saw the events. Could she be trying to extrapolate money? Sure.
Or just skewed from age, right? Because wasn't she kind of young?
She was young. It really depends on where she was and the perception and how old she was. But I still say, if she believes that they were trying to help, I have to personally take that into account and say, okay, maybe they were trying to help. Maybe because I don't agree with the phenomenon. I don't see the validity in the phenomenon. I'm already going to be a skeptic at everything and everyone. I don't think two things are necessarily connected. I don't think this possible relationship has much to do with, did they help people dealing with quote unquote demonic forces? Now, does it add to the fact that, well, that would paint them as charlatans in some way, people that were definitely geniuses at covering something up or creating a fictional character of themselves? Sure. There's truth to that. But I do believe, because they weren't taking money for their efforts and they were instead trying to help this family, according to the family, that maybe they were trying to help. and they were just trying to do the right thing. Now, many people over the course of time, over the course of our history, all of our histories, had good intentions, have done the right thing for a time, have gotten to a certain point in their career or in their business where it stops being for the good and becomes for the profit. And I don't mean P-R-O-P-H-E-T. I mean P-R-O-F-I-T. And that's when things...
Yeah, you know me.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I could definitely see that aspect where things turn and it's all about the money because the profit margin could be seen. You know, you have people that are obviously creative and inventive. They began their careers as artists. That's a very specific field. That's a very difficult thing to attain unless you already have it in you, that spark within you to be creative, to be inspiring, and just change the world with your brush, if you will. They could be guilty of both or none.
I agree with that. One of the things you mentioned is that the haunting hasn't been recorded since they moved out. There's a subsequent owner of the house, Norma Sutcliffe, who owned the property after the Perrons did. She's actually reported that there's been things like doors banging, but nothing like what the Perrons said was actually part of the house. You know,
sounds like she's a better resident, is what I'm hearing.
They like her more, I guess. The
Yeah.
ghosts like her more, which is another thing that's interesting.
Was like that. She was just sitting there going, "I like you." What was her name? Nancy. What was her name?
Norma.
So they're like, "Hey, Norma, man, thank you for..."
Norma's just an older woman. She's just trying to get by.
Chilling. She's like, "I don't have to hear these damn kids all day, every day." Bam, bam, bam. They're the ones slamming the doors, not the ghosts. You know?
The ghosts are like, why are we getting blamed for this? We've just been vibing.
You ever been in a house with freaking kids? They all slam the door. Nobody can shut a door like a human being. All of them have to slam the door.
That's true. That is
Nobody
true.
knows how to sit in a chair without jumping into it.
And I promise you, if you have a house full of 5 kids and mom and dad think there might be a ghost, I'm blaming that ghost for everything that happens.
That's actually true.
Everything.
Yeah.
Oh, Sissy got her hair cut in the middle of the night. Oh my God, it was a ghost, Mom. Wasn't me. Why is there hair and scissors by your bed? I don't know. That's where the ghost dropped them.
The ghost wants to blame me. They're trying to pin it on me. Obviously.
I cannot stand for it. I'm a patsy. You know, that's where we go with. Now I'm starting to think maybe it was the kids.
And it is the kid that's perpetuating that this was all real, too.
Oh, brilliant.
Oh, my God. This is one of the coolest conspiracy theories
Guys.
I think I've ever been involved in.
Like, she's just sitting around going, guys, and I don't think this is true. You can't quote me on it. But let's just say, perhaps. Guys, Mom and Dad are pissing us off, right? We're tired of doing chores. It's BS. Why do we have to do chores, all right? It's a new age. It's the 70s, man. I want to go be free. Here's what we do. There's 5 of us. We're basically an army in our house. We got 14 rooms to play with. Let's be ghosts.
Literally, they're outnumbered.
Let's be ghosts. And then by the time the Warrens come, they're like, oh, man, this is really a big deal now. We got to keep this up for at least 6 more years.
And yeah, they perpetuate it. They make it sound worse. They're like, Lorraine, girl, let me tell you what I've been through.
Right?
She's like, I can sense the presence here. And the ghosts that maybe are just really there, just like, bro, I'm just trying to go to bed.
The ghosts are under the kids are under Carolyn's chair. There's like 2 of them during the seance just trying to lift her chair up and they can't get up. That's why she got thrown off of it and the chair fell down. Like, oh, we almost hit it.
We have different conspiracies. Mine is that the ghosts are real and that the kids pinned it on the ghost. Yours is that the ghost didn't even exist and they all made it up. I feel like my conspiracy theory version is a little more plausible.
I think mine makes more sense. I'm just saying, no matter what, I think the kids are in on it. That's what I'm going with.
Well, yeah. I mean, ultimately, we agree on that.
Hey, this is the part where we're just talking. These are not facts. These are just random opinions.
I've used the word conspiracy theory like 5 times now to explicitly express this as a joke. But
do not want to be a QAnon podcast, okay?
Here we are.
Do not.
Or maybe we do.
No, John, don't even joke
John
that into the ether.
stuff.
Stop that. Stop it. Stop it.
John's like, and let me just mix a little bit of flammable combustible chemical in here for you and just make things a little more spicy.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness gracious. So overall, like, how do we feel about the fact that this was changed so much? Does that bother you that we didn't actually get that? No, we didn't actually chase the ghosts away. I mean, I get why they had to do it that way because it would make for a very unsatisfying film to many people. But on the same token, you're introducing a lot of things that aren't true. Most of what you see the Warrens do isn't factual in terms of there is no exorcism. There is no Carolyn being possessed to the extent she was in the film and then being excised. Like, that's not true. And the demons or whatever it is remain there for many years afterwards. So the idea painted in the film is they saved this family, and they did not. They just didn't.
Yeah, I think I sit in such a very neutral, uncertain area on all of this because I don't have enough to discredit it, but I don't have enough to fully credit it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's not supposed to be a documentary, right? And it's not supposed to be a docudrama. They use the based on a true story because that makes it more scary for people watching. And they know they can get away with it. They can take a lot of creative license with that.
From a film standpoint, it's a lot of fun. It's very enjoyable. I really like The Conjuring. The first and the second one are both pretty good. So the film itself is great. It's just a matter of, how do you either separate what we do and don't know about the Warrens and this situation in particular versus how much are you willing to just like skate by and accept and whatever. And I think for the most part, until I started to actually learn about the Warrens, I definitely enjoyed the movie more prior to that because I was in this naivety space and it was beautiful. I love that, being blissfully ignorant.
So you wish you never did this episode of the podcast?
Well, I learned about some of this actually a couple of years ago or a few years ago or something because similar to Paranormal Activity, I had this misunderstanding that there was like some legitimacy or a lot of legitimacy, I should say, when it relates to The Conjuring comparatively to what we actually know to be true. And so I started to learn things out a long time ago. And that's actually what made, I stopped rewatching them. And I'm not as eager to go see them because I enjoyed Ed and Lorraine Warren in the movie for who they were and the actors for how they presented the characters. I love that version. And the true Warren story taints it a little bit.
I'm of the camp that the true Warren story is still too shrouded in mystery to really put your finger on it anymore. I used to think that I had it figured out, but now looking further into some of these stories, I'm not as convinced as I was before because even with the Penny stuff, maybe it did happen or maybe it didn't. And she's trying to get into some of that money that the Warrens made off of their legacy. And until there's any sort of adjudication, I'm not going to hold any sort of opinion on that against them. But when it comes to what they did in this movie or in this story, I like the idea that they actually came up with an end. If you become one of these people who looks into the stories and says, oh my God, it's based off a true story. Now it does the job that you want it to do, which is give somebody enough to titillate them into looking further into the story and doing further research. The first time I saw this movie, I really loved it. I absolutely adored everything about it. I got so into it. And then afterwards is when I found out more about the Warrens that I didn't appreciate. And that's where I get kind of lost in the second movie. I didn't appreciate as much because of it. And then definitely in the third movie, I was tapped out. Since I was able to reset some of my expectations on the movie, as well as now reset some of my expectations on the Warrens themselves, I was able to enjoy this movie again. I was able to get into it, appreciate them for who they were as far as the movie was concerned, and enjoy the movie for that sake.
Yeah, I like how they just basically made their own universe out of this deal. I mean, true, not true, whatever. They made a very exciting film franchise, and horror fans love it. They made some spin-offs that, are hit or miss, but people still really get engaged by them. I mean, there are some truly terrifying aspects of it. Annabelle, though I think the movies are, hit or miss, the doll itself is still pretty terrifying. I mean, it doesn't do anything. It literally just sits there and you think it's looking at you the whole time. It's menacing as hell. That's very well done. Very well done. Now, the movies, I don't care what the movies did or didn't do. They made this whole world that is extremely profitable. They have an insane amount of spinoffs. And I want to segue to the movie at this point because the casting is perfection. And I have long been a fan of Patrick Wilson. I think he's an exceptional actor that doesn't get nearly the credit that he deserves. I mean, he's been in so many movies and made every one of them better. He just makes movies better. Vera Farmiga, same thing. She is in so much, and every time she shows up, she is perfection. And whatever you think about the real Warrens, these are the Warrens I want to be true. Like, I want them to be a real couple.
Right.
They feel like a real couple. They feel like two people who love each other and also have these gifts or these problems that they have to contend with. And they're doing it because they really believe in doing the best for others. Like, they really just want to make other people's lives better. Whatever happened in real life, this is what I want the world to be. I'm okay with it because the film does such a good job with casting. James Wan is a phenomenal horror director. I mean, he's made so many great horror films and series, actually. This is just one of those where the casting is out of the park, in my opinion.
I couldn't agree more.
Lily Taylor, too, I should say. Throw her in the mix, too. She's exceptional as well in this one.
Yeah, it's very hard to point your finger at any weak link. Patrick Wilson, again, is just fantastic. I like how him and James Wan have worked together so much on different movies, and it keeps on coming out as something great. I love it.
Yeah, I think, Aaron, you really touch on the portion of the film that I love the most, and that's the loving dynamic between Ed and Lorraine in this.
Absolutely.
And I think Vera and Patrick do such a wonderful job of connecting with each other, and they give off such a beautiful, wholesome, loving energy that they collectively, like, their love can heal and save anything type of deal. And I think that is such a wholesome element to have added into a horror movie that is really underappreciated. Right? Like, this is one of the most special things about the franchise is their love and relationship and their care for each other. Even as you get into the later ones, you still see them supporting and loving each other through every step. And at no point will they ever be willing to sacrifice each other for, whatever the case is that they're working on. And I think that that's the beautiful piece that makes The Conjuring something different from any other exorcism type film or franchise.
And I do love their relationship as it pertains to their daughter. Judy and whatnot. Like, there's the moment where she has a vision of Judy floating by the dock and she calls home and Ed's freaking out and she's freaking out. Like, that's real parents freaking out. It came across that way. I thought that was a wonderful relationship. Like, they're showing in that moment, even though they don't have Judy as very much of the film, like, they're showing in that moment, she's their most important thing. Like, it's not like they forgot about her. She's the most important thing. And I like that element. I just thought the casting was, again, phenomenal.
I love the part where we get introduced to Judy, where he's showing the room, the museum room to that reporter, and you see the camera move back and forth behind that shelving unit, and then it turns out you're like, oh my god, what is watching them right now? And it turns out to be Judy. It's a great way to build tension and get you into the story more.
Absolutely. I do want to talk about a couple things that happen in the movie. I like the static TV shot. I feel that's very much like a little nod to Poltergeist. Would we agree?
Absolutely.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I like that. That was cute. I did wonder why the Warrens show up and the wife's got all this bruising and everything. And the first thing we jump to is demons and ghosts. Like, I'm just saying, today's a little different.
That's true. In the 70s, you didn't get in somebody's personal business, though. And in the same respect, if you're calling somebody over and you're showing them the business, it's probably less likely that it's something internal within the family.
It's lupus.
How about this game? Want to play hide and clap?
That's so cool.
The moment or the game?
The game itself.
Why is that?
Because, well, as a kid, I remember hide and seek being such a big deal. Every time we were in somebody's house and it was bigger than it could be, we would all play hide and seek. And I remember it being the coolest game ever. And the idea of making it hide and clap, where you have to clap for everything, makes it even cooler, because it's harder to. It'd be easier in smaller places because you have a better opportunity to hide or just be quiet and make sure you stay out of the way. I like so many aspects of it. It's like Marco Polo, but different. But the way they used it in the movie was fantastic. It created so much tension, created so many scary moments, and it just executed some of the best parts.
I just love the moment where it was like right behind her in the basement, and just, that was great.
Yeah. When you're researching the actual story, they talk a lot about there was maybe one or two mean ghosts, but the rest of the ghosts were nice ghosts. They protected them, some of them, or they just moved stuff around, or they played games with them. And it's the one scene where they play the game with them. Yes, it's creepy because it's a ghost story and it's supposed to be weird, but I like the aspect of them showing that the ghosts weren't always these monsters trying to kill them.
Yeah, and the last thing I want to mention from the movie is when Lorraine falls from, I think it was the second story, and goes all the way to the basement.
Mm-hmm.
It was like an elevator shaft. I mean, it felt like 12 floors when she's going down there. Like, there's a lot of floors that she bounced through.
I was thinking the same thing, but then I remembered how many times Liam Neeson had to hop over that fence, and all the cuts for Taken 3. How many? I remember how they stretched out that hopping over this fence scene. So I was like, okay, yeah, that's right. That sometimes happens.
Okay, so what the movie got right, we already talked about it, what it got wrong, etc. Do you think it respected the victims? Amanda, do you think this film respects the people that it's portraying?
Yeah, I mean, from the Warren standpoint, if you believe that they're wonderful people, it presents them in a wonderful light. If you believe that they're terrible people, from their perspective, at least they were put in a beautiful light. But when it comes to the family, the Perrons that were really kind of dealing with the crux of this, I think so, because from their perspective and what they've stated along the years, they really felt like the Warrens did the best that they could. And so having their perspective, the statements that they've made over the years, be a reflection in the movie, I think is a good thing.
I feel like they respected everybody just well enough. The Perrons didn't have any sort of problems that stood out in the movie, and I like you said earlier, I like this version of the Warrens.
Yeah, I thought they did a very good job of the Perrons and really creating a family that cares about each other. The husband that isn't really sure about what's going on, the wife that definitely feels something's going on, and the kids feel like a whole family. And the Warrens, I mean, they're given total adoration, honestly. So there's no negativity there. As we close this out, what would you have done differently?
There's nothing I can think of to change on this. It's an example of taking a story, bringing out all the best elements of it, and putting it on screen for an entertainment value. And it respects everyone to a great degree. So I wouldn't really change anything.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that.
Yeah, I think this is probably one of the better horror films in recent years, I would say. Like, this is top shelf in terms of the movie. I would down the road like to see a really in-depth docudrama about the Warrens, though.
That would be fun.
Well, we're not painting them as heroes. We're actually looking at their history.
There's a TV series, isn't there, on the Warrens, like the true story behind them?
Yeah, the one you're talking about is Devil's Road, the true story of Ed and Lorraine Warren, right? I think.
Yeah. Yep, that's it. It looks like it's actually available on quite a few things, because it looks like you can see some things on Apple TV Plus, on Amazon Prime, on Max. So check it out. I mean, I haven't seen it either. That's something that I did want to check out because of this episode that we were recording. I was like, that'd be really interesting to take a look at.
Fascinating. Although it's also known as a shock doc. So I don't know what that means. Is that like, I don't know what that means.
Yeah, I don't know what that means either. It's the name of the show is Shock Docs: The Devil Made Me Do It.
Well, it's fascinating. And this is not the only Warren adventure we're going to tackle. Like I said, we have talked about the Amityville Horror. You can go back and find that in the feed. That was early last year. or was it late last year? Late last year. And then next up is The Exorcism of Emily Rose, which is a different kind of film. Like, you might think it's just another exorcism tale, and it is not. There's a lot more to that one. A lot of people haven't seen that movie, so maybe you can watch it before the next episode. Remember, we are every 2 weeks now. We're not weekly show, and you can always find us on The Hollywood Outsider as well. Whew. John, it sounds like you feel a little differently about the Warrens before we're done. Is that fair?
I've changed my stance. I've changed my stance on being a little bit more open to them again, as far as what was going on. I initially had a feeling of being bothered by this con man that was carting his wife from all over the country, with the quote unquote hauntings. But it seems a lot less like that, and a lot more like maybe they were at least trying to make their mark in a good way.
What brought you to the con man and the wife with mental illness piece?
You know what? It was a documentary on the Devil Made Me Do It, which is the Conjuring 3. It was a documentary on that story, because it became all about trying to save this guy from going to jail because, quote unquote, the devil made him kill his family, as opposed to and they were involved in that whole debacle. And
that's what we'll probably cover down the road.
Yeah.
And the reason why we're not doing them all at once is because it would be, a 3 or 4 part podcast. And while we could do that, I just feel like we have a very diverse set of tastes at Inspired by a True Story. And I want to keep tackling different kinds of films. So we'll come back to it down the road. Fair enough?
Very fair. And besides, we got plenty of movies to work with as far as Inspired by a True Story. Why not just there's plenty of Halloween months coming up. We don't have to roll them all out in one Halloween month.
How about Rudy?
Rudy.
Can we do Rudy? Just to move the spirit a little up. Just kidding. All right. Well, if you enjoyed this podcast, share the show on your social media and give us a review in your favorite podcast app. You are the best source of promotion. So please tell your true crime maniac friends about us. And thank you for listening to Inspired by a True Story. Now, let's keep those artists honest.